Sweet. All right. Hi. So I'm going to get you all to stand up for a quick second. Say hi to your neighbor. I'm really glad that Braj took some time to introduce everyone, because so often we go through these meetings and conferences and we don't get to meet these really interesting people next to us. It's as if the only interesting person is the person standing in the front of the room. And I, even though I'm standing right here, I heartily disagree with that statement. There's some really interesting people in the audience, and we're going to take a little bit of time to meet some of you. So go ahead and sit back down. Stay by the podium. Oh my God, you are killing my vibe. I'm just joking. We're gonna work with this. I'm gonna stay here. I normally don't like to kind of be constrained by a podium. Can I just move this?
Just stay close to the mic.
Just stay close to the mic. Yeah, I don't like stuff between me and the audience. How's this? All right, cool. So I'd like to start with a story. And the story is about embrace. Is that okay? Is that feedback noise? All right. Oh, okay. Somebody's using the bathroom. Okay. So just for those of you watching the video, there's some white noise that we were trying to figure out. So in 2007, there were a group of 5 students at Stanford, and they came together from all kinds of different parts of Stanford in what has now become the D School to take a class in design. And they were taking a class for, it was designed for extreme sustainability or affordability, and they're presented with a problem, the problem of premature infant mortality. So every year, about 20 million infants are born premature. Within the first 24 hours, about 1 million of those infants will die. And by many estimates, again, these are infants that we don't have a lot of access to, so these are estimates. Within the first 4 weeks, 4 million will die. And the biggest problem that they're facing is hypothermia, right? These infants are so tiny, they can fit in your hand sometimes. And their energy and their resources that were supposed to be directed towards developing organs while in utero, and the mother's womb was supposed to be taking care of the heat problems, now has to be redirected to keeping them warm. They don't even have the fat content to keep them at the right temperature. And so here they are, and that's the biggest problem. And even if they survive that, oftentimes because that energy's been rerouted to develop it, to keeping them warm, they suffer chronic health conditions, because heart conditions and other conditions, because they haven't been able to adequately develop that. So they were set the task of solving this problem, right? And they're coming from all kinds of different walks of life: computer science, business, electrical engineering, really not from the healthcare field or from the design field. So they start going about solving this problem, and they look, okay, well, what's a first world solution? Anybody? What do we do here? Incubator, right. And you know how much incubators cost? Yeah, they're about $2,000 or $20,000. Sorry, yeah, I took it down a notch. That's if they're cheap. So then they decided, well, like most of these infants are dying in third world countries. So we need to start making a cheaper incubator. And they start hard at work making a cheaper incubator. Well, fortunately, one of the students, Linus, ends up taking a trip to Nepal. And on his trip to Nepal, he's walking through the hospital and he sees there's all these unused incubators. And he says, and he calls the doctor and he says, what's the deal with this? You know, you have this problem with premature infant mortality, and yet here are all these incubators sitting around unused. I'm not sure I understand. And the doctor looked and said, well, the babies aren't dying here. They're dying in the villages. And something clicked, like, whoa, wait, we need to go back and look at this problem again. So he goes back, and the team gets back together at the drawing board, and they actually kind of like wrestled around with this. Do we just keep going? It's a 10-week class at Stanford. I got to go back, and they're all looking at 6-figure, 7-figure jobs coming out. They're about ready to graduate. But here is what I call the rabbit hole of design. They're seeing like, wait, there's something here. Do we spend the time to investigate? And they said, you know what, this problem is too important to let it go. we're going to investigate. And so they start going down this rabbit hole. And they decide, oh, okay, incubators, who are they designed for? They're designed for clinicians. And where the babies are dying, what don't they have? They don't have clinicians. And they actually don't even have reliable electricity. So who should we design? Who's the user of this product? So they decided that the user, really, they're going to design something for the new mother. And who is this new mother? Part of understanding the problem is understanding who is your user. And the new mother is someone that often doesn't trust Western medicine. And again, doesn't have access to a clinician or access to reliable electricity. So what do we do with this? So taking that step, they started working and they came up with this interesting solution. So there they were looking at the original problem was incubators are too expensive. And as they started looking at it, they're like, well, that's not the real problem. What's the real problem? Anyone? I like an interactive discussion, so.
The incubators aren't designed for the end user.
Okay, there, that's a stab at the problem, great. Anyone else?
Transportation.
Okay, transportation, okay. They can't get the babies.
In this appliance, this, in a village,
Great,
to trust this new device.
yeah, awesome answers. And I want you to zoom out.
Do the families know what's going on?
They potentially do and they potentially don't. Like, again, these aren't like, this isn't a hyper-educated like community necessarily.
What's not in village that is in hospitals is important here.
Okay,
Because babies are dying in villages but not in the hospital.
right,
So I wanted to know what's not there in village.
Yeah.
That's there in hospital.
so yeah, clinical care would be an example. And I'm gonna zoom out even farther. The babies aren't staying warm. That's it, that's the problem.
Use maternal heat.
Yeah, so that starts to get at what a solution. And you said use maternal heat, right? So where are these babies supposed to be?
Next to the mother.
In utero, right? Ideally, they would still be in the womb, right? And getting that. So these babies aren't staying warm. And when they shifted that focus on what's the real problem we're trying to solve, they understood that, oh, incubators are just a solution, just one solution to keep a baby warm. We can start looking at other solutions. And so they did just that. And so that was the real need. We need to keep the baby warm. And this is what they came up with. They came up with this little papoose sort of thing. It's made with a space-age material that really retains heat. And in the back, there's a pocket. And in the pocket, you put a paraffin wax sleeve. And this paraffin wax is amazing. It goes through phase change right at the right temperature. So you toss this sleeve in a pot of boiling water. It'll absorb all the energy it needs, and it stays at temperature for 5 hours. Then you just swap it out with another one, right? There's no setting the right temperature. There's nothing to do, like if you were to say, oh, well, you keep the baby at 37 degrees. There's no reason for the mother to question, well, that's for Western babies. My baby, that seems a little too hot. There's just, like, you do this, and it's really simple. And where is the baby now? Now the baby is in basically this, like, high-tech sleeping bag with the mother. And what do we know about babies and new mothers and new babies and new mothers? Where do they need to be? In contact, in connection. There's a lot to be said about research around oxytocin and the bonding that happens. And here we're taking babies that aren't even born at term and we're putting them in a plastic box so separated from the mother. I would argue that what they came up with, these 5 graduate students, was an infinitely better solution for a number of reasons. One, 200 times cheaper. Okay, so there's 500,000 infants born prematurely in the US on average a year. If only half of them use this solution, and there's, by some estimates, it's about $275,000 differential between a preterm baby and an at-term baby. Do you have any idea how much money this would save? Who's a quick mathematician? $7 billion, right? And here's the thing I love about this problem. These 5 people weren't healthcare workers. They weren't even professional designers. I mean, they were taking a class in design. what do? They bothered to take the time to really look at the problem. And what's interesting about this is, if you think about this in context, up until this point, companies and countries, well-meaning, well-interested, had been shipping incubator after incubator, millions of dollars worth of medical equipment to these countries. And that solution was lost on them. All it took was time to really look at the problem. And that's what I'm here to talk to you about. And that's what design really is about. So, another quick thought exercise. If I were to ask you, how long is 1 million seconds? We throw these numbers out here. Million, billion, trillion, zillion, I don't know, like whatever the numbers we're coming up with now. Any idea how long 1 million seconds is? There you go. There's a phone. You can figure it out. It's about 11, it's a little over 11 days, 11 and a half days. Any idea how long 1 billion seconds is? 33 years. That's the difference we're talking about. So just to keep that in mind, as people are throwing numbers at you, millionaires, billionaires, there's actually quite a bit of difference between those two, right? And when we're talking about $3 trillion, 3.2, 3 point something trillion dollars in healthcare spending, you know how long 1 trillion seconds is? 30,000 years. So we're talking about the dawn of like real human history. So that's like $3 every second since humans kind of started painting on caves. That's what we're talking about, healthcare spending. And when we take the time to really look at the problem that we're trying to address, we don't need to be spending all that money. We can spend it more effectively. So, this is me. I like to start with 3 questions. So who am I? Why am I talking to you all? Mostly because Yuli strong-armed me into doing this, and I'm really excited to be here. But this is not me. So I was lucky enough, 2005, I was in the graduation, I was graduating from Stanford and was listening to Steve Jobs, and I felt like he was speaking directly to me because he was saying, like, it doesn't make sense moving forward. You can connect the dots looking backwards. And here I was. I just finished this graduate program in design. I'd done 2 years joint program in mechanical engineering and art, did an in-depth year in robotics. I'd worked at IDEO. I was teaching design at Stanford, and I was going to medical school. And my, the dean of my program and the founder of IDEO was looking at me and said, what are you smoking? Basically, like, why are you going to medicine? I'm like, I have a feeling that medicine needs some design. We need some help here. And I think the best way to do it is from the inside as a clinician. And flash forward a few years, another 4 years, I was graduating from med school. I was giving the valedictory speech. And again, I was making another weird shift. I'd been offered a position at MIT at Media Lab to build, like, what's the future of healthcare? And my dream job, I would have loved to go do it. And at the same time, I felt like, well, I'm just a glorified medical student at this point. I really don't know enough to make a real impact. I need clinical understanding. So that led me to residency. And so arguably I turned down my dream job for hell. But it really paid off in the long run. So I moved back here. I was teaching med device design, co-teaching with a good friend and mentor of mine at Stanford for a few years, and then been really trying to implement or see how we can implement design and leadership into healthcare. So what I didn't say was, before all that journey, I was an officer in the Navy for about 12 years, started at the Naval Academy, really focused on leadership and teamwork. So those are my passions, leadership and teamwork. How do we make exceptional teams? And design. And I want to bring them into healthcare because that's a touch point that really affects every human life. So, to why I'm here. I think healthcare needs a revolution. I think we all need to be a part of, right? And why do I say that? I go to a lot of innovation conferences. I do a lot of speaking and talking and listening to what's going on. And when we start seeing that very few patients are satisfied by the experience, clinicians are killing themselves at record rates. Doctors have a suicide rate that's almost twice the national average. Like, what's sustainable about this? This is the Titanic, and we're running through the iceberg right now. We need a new ship. And that's what I want to help start here today, anywhere that we can start it. And I think revolutions are founded on guiding principles. And these are my guiding principles. Health is personal. What health means to me is different than what it means to you, and to you, and to you, and to you. And therefore, the best place to deliver the optimal healthcare is at that provider-patient interface. Everything else we do needs to support that relationship. And healthcare has become so complicated that there's no way one provider can do it all. And so healthcare takes a team. So how do we bring that team together to support that touch point between the oncologist and that patient, between the family care doc, burnt out or otherwise, and their patient, right? How do we optimize that care delivery? Because at the end of the day, if I'm going to the doctor, I don't care that statistically this hospital has treated my chronic conditions much better than the other hospital. I care that what my provider is able to do for me. So I'd like to enlist you all in that, in this revolution. So, as I said before, you all are really kind of the reason for being here. So I want to get to know a little bit about you, and I want you to get to know a little bit about each other. So pick a partner, someone you don't know. Go ahead. And if you get up to do it, awesome. Okay, we don't have a lot of time, so we're going to do this quickly. Okay, so now that you picked your partner, we're going to do, I just tossed between a number of exercises I wanted you to do. One, and I'm going to tell you what I would normally threaten you with, is I like each person to tell their partner their story of their first kiss. And there's a reason behind that. For many audiences, yeah, we'll let you laugh about it. So, in the interest of time, we're not gonna do that, but I am gonna have you do something else, because that gets very interesting for people. One of the reasons we do that is because one of the reasons I have you do that is because when patients come to us, they're coming with their stories. And it's really important while we're working on innovation and this and that and the other, we really figure out, like, this is what we're here for. We're here for the patient and their stories. And I'm asking you to share, if I'm asking you to share this, the experience, your first positive experience of a kiss, and that feels a little bit kind of edgy, imagine what it's like to come in and talk to your doctor about something that is really edgy. Like, we need to reconnect and stay connected to what that experience is, because that's what we're here for. We're here to improve that experience. But I'll save you that for today, just because there's a time constraint. We're going to have you do a bad idea. So what I want you to do is, on your notebook, on your pad, on whatever you have, write down the worst idea you can think of. Everybody. Okay? Worst idea. And if you don't have a partner, raise your hand. I'll find you a partner. I'm talking babies with machine guns, right? Razor blade cereals, whatever you want. Like, really worst. I have one with card with no brakes. So go ahead. Pick your worst idea. And we can make it work if you're a team of 3. Okay. Once you have your idea, does everyone have their idea written? We're going to blitzkrieg through this. Now write down your idea and hand it to your partner. So if you've already shared your ideas, I heard somebody say you already shared your ideas. Everybody take somebody else's idea Okay, hold on 1 second. And your job is to figure out on what planet, in which circumstance needs to be true to transform this bad idea into a good idea. Like, what needs to be true for this to be a good idea? Go. Okay. Normally I like to let this exercise run a little bit, and one of the things that I love to hear, and unfortunately I feel like I have to put a kibosh on it, I love when the audience is animated and they're talking to each other and really getting into it, because this is a chance to get to know these really fabulous, interesting people that are here alongside you that oftentimes we kind of just walk by and don't get to know. So despite my desire to let you keep going, I'm going to kind of put a kibosh on it, and happy to have it continue later. So just in the interest of sharing, does anybody have a bad idea and the solution to it that they want to share out?
Someone's gonna walk in with a gun.
A walk-in with a gun. That is a scary, and I've actually faced it. It is a scary bad idea. And what was the
Badge entrance and security.
a bad what?
Badge entrance.
Okay. So in what world would a walk-in with a gun be a good idea? What? If you have security. So it's still a scary idea. That's a good solution to the walk-in with a gun. But when would you want to have a walk-in with a gun? What? Protect yourselves. Yeah, okay, what else? Anyone? I'm going to turn this out to the audience.
If it is a game.
A game. Great idea.
Sorry, I missed that.
And Siri missed it. What if you're having one of those programs where you turn in your weapons? Right? That's a walk-in with the gun that might be good. What about if you're having just a water gun fight at work? Who knows? I don't know. That might be fun. It doesn't have to be that kind of gun. It could be a staple gun that they're helping put up sheetrock. I don't know. What else? Any other ideas about when this might be a good idea?
When a policeman rescues you from another gunman.
Yes. The walk-in might be someone to help you out in a bad situation, right? It could be Texas, so everybody's walking in with a gun.
How about walking in a movie, like a hero?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be walking into clinic. So this is kind of interesting, right? Like we take the words and how do we spin it on its head? And the reason I had you do this is what design is about. And many of, this is one of the things design's about. How do we look at these ideas and find what's the kernel of goodness in it? Okay? We're presented with ideas constantly. And many of us are in leadership situations. One of the things I challenge you as a leader is when the people when your staff come to you with horrible ideas, how do you find the kernel of goodness in it, right? How do you develop them, encourage them to come back with even better ideas, right? Oh, that's really interesting. What if this happened? That'd be good. And why don't you keep working on that and bring it back, right? Because what you want to do is encourage that engagement in their part. You want to encourage their creativity. So, one more minute. That's a bad idea. So, what is innovation? And by 1 minute, he means 2 hours. So I used to live in a building in downtown San Francisco. It's one of these super high-tech, what do you call it? Condo complexes or something like that. And it's got, half my neighbors worked at Twitter and at Facebook and at Google and at Amazon. The buses would just pull up right next to it and they would just shuttle them down. So super high-tech crowd, and the building felt like it had to keep pace, and so they put in a high-tech trash chute. And here you go. you have to press a button to say, I'm going to dump out garbage, another button to dump out recycling, and there's a little light to say it's in use. This is the thing, though. If you're dumping out garbage, all of a sudden it locks the chute out for 37 floors, so no one else can dump other stuff, right? And then even if you came with your garbage or your recycling, it would take about 30 seconds to clear. Maybe it was a lot less than, maybe it was 5 seconds. It felt like 30 seconds, and that's the issue. For it to clear, then you can dump out your recycling. So now what's happening? We're trained, that's about 29.5 seconds, way too long for this crowd. So this is what we have, right? Every day, 37 floors of this, right? This is our high-tech idea. Well, what's a better idea?
Move from San Francisco.
Okay, if we're solving the problem of trash chutes. 2 chutes, gravity fed, right? 1 for recycling, 1 for trash. Gravity doesn't fail, not yet at least, right? Okay? So we have this idea that innovation's all about technology and apps, and when iPads came out, we're trying to shove iPads in every hole and like trying to figure out like, oh, well, we can use an iPad for this, and it's unfortunate. Whenever I do innovation work in workshops and whatnot, like the first answer for everything is, well, we can make an app. Well, do you know how often apps are downloaded now? Maybe, oh, yeah, no one's using apps. And so this idea, like, oh, it has to be a technical solution, it's actually not. So I'm going to tell you what innovation is. It's simply a new and better answer to a problem. That's it. If you can get there in a straight line, do it. If a paperclip is the best solution, awesome. There's less points of failure. So I don't want people to be scared about like, oh, I don't know how to use this technology or that technology. The idea is to make technology that works for all of us. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up with this real quick. Now that I'm at like, what, 7 minutes left? So design, what's design? I'm breaking it down into 3 steps. First is to really understand the problem. And that's why I told you that story. It's about like what happens when you understand the problem and understand what's in front of you. The second thing is this is what designers are known for. It's the ideation phase where there's like Post-it notes and all different colors and like, you know, all those fun little gadgets you see people, the designers work with and whatnot. This is where you get to kind of blow up and come up with as many crazy ideas as possible. I'm going to give you a 2 quick examples. And I was teaching a group of medical students and physicians from all across Asia at Stanford. It was a workshop. And I had them work on a problem of how do you help patients find their appointments? Because that's always a problem. You get in the hospitals, like, I hate to say this, and maybe I shouldn't, but I will anyway. It feels like the architects are all having seizures when they design it because it's impossible to find, there's no straight lines in a hospital. And so it's often impossible to find your appointment. So how do you help them find it? And as they went through, they knew that I love superheroes. Huge superhero fan. And I challenged them to come up with ideas that are physically impossible. So they said, what if you had superheroes meet them at their door and fly them to their appointments? I thought, that's amazing. That's a great idea, right? Who here's been to Disneyland? Okay, first of all, everybody raise your hands as high as you can. All right, high as you can. Touch the ceiling. There you go. Okay, so you all know how to raise your hand. Who's been here to Disneyland? All right, cool. So now, Disney is not the cheapest experience on the planet, and I know that's not a real mouse. It's not even, when I first took my daughter, she was 2 years old, I took her to go see Ariel because she was in love with Ariel. I mean, I got moved emotionally. I know that's not a mermaid. It's definitely not Ariel. It's not even really red hair. And yet it's exciting to be part of that experience. What if you go to the hospital and there were people dressed up like superheroes taking you to your appointments? How do we transform the experience and what it means to be going to a hospital? I mean, I would go to the hospital more often, especially if Wonder Woman was escorting me. I'd be like, hey, I feel like I've got a throat issue coming on. But certainly, and GE did this, I think GE or Philips did this when they took CTs and MRIs and young patients were having to get sedated in order to make it through their scan. And they simply painted it up like a pirate ship or a rocket ship. And they created a story around why you needed to lie still. And why you needed, well, if you're in a rocket ship, of course you're going to lie still. And of course there's going to be loud banging noises. This is what happens when you hurtle through space. And all of a sudden they saw that the need for sedation and redoing the scans dropped. I think it was like 50%. Just by looking at what's the experience. So that's the ideation part. And prototype, that's like building things out so we can test out ideas. And one of the things I often run into, this is a problem I often have, I try to take 40 plus years of experience and cram it into an hour, usually 8-hour talk, but this is even less. So I seriously want to be a resource for you all, and we'll get into how I can do that, but I want to introduce some of these ideas to you. All right. So this is about failure. We're going to run through this. Basically, if you want to innovate, you need to be okay with failing. Not want to fail, but you got to be okay with it. And one of the things that makes it really hard to innovate in medicine is, what do we equate with failure? Death, mortality, right? Morbidity, bad patient outcomes. So how are we going to come up with something new when that's our approach to failure? We're hesitant to rearrange the chairs in the waiting room because, no, this works. Let's not touch it. This god-awful fluorescent lighting, well, people can find their way. We're not going to touch it, right? It's hard to innovate in a culture that operates so much out of fear. Oh, we are going to do this. So I want you all to stand up again. This is a problem about putting me up here. I get to take over. You have to drag me out of here. Anyway, so I want you all to imagine a metal plank in front of you. And it's about 10 feet long. It's about 2 feet wide. And it's about 2 inches thick. 2 inches thick, steel, solid. And it's out in front of you. And I want you to imagine walking back and forth across it 10 times. Anybody have any problem with that? Raise your hand if you think you'd have an issue with it. Okay, you might. It's just sitting on the ground. You can do this eyes open. So one person might have a problem with it. How many people were worried as they were walking into this room, like, oh my God, I'm worried about falling. I should stay close to the wall. Anybody? All right. Now, I'm going to take that same metal plank. I'm going to attach it off the side of the Empire State Building. I'm going to put a bubble around it so there's no wind. And I'm going to somehow artificially take the sway out of the building. Now, how many people don't feel confident they could do this? Raise your hands high. How many have a different experience with this than walking the plank on the ground? Yeah. What's changed? Go ahead and sit down. The consequence. But you weren't worried about falling here. Why should you be worried about falling up there? It's the thing that's changed is fear. Your perception of the problem. Fear robs us of our very basic abilities. So as you walk through all the stuff you're doing, as you're innovating, as you're coming up with new ideas, unfortunately, the fear base that operates in healthcare is one of the things that robs us of our ability to innovate. And it's just something to be aware of. Okay. So I'm going to leave you with a few missions. One, I want you to be unreasonable. And what I mean by that is George Bernard Shaw had this great quote. He said, and I think it was a non-gender specific man, but the reasonable man wakes up and expects to adapt to the world around them, right? The unreasonable one expects the world to adapt to him or her. So all progress and change is due to unreasonable people. If you're not satisfied with the way the world is, how do we get about changing it? So I challenge you to be unreasonable. Figure out something that's not working for you and find a way to do something about it. This goes back to the fear thing. So, okay, I'm a psychiatrist. I like challenging a little personal growth. So look at your life and look at where fear enters your life and see, if you don't want to challenge it quite yet, just at least be aware of it. And see like, okay, who's the person you didn't ask out? What's the job you didn't take? Who's the person you didn't go meet? Because it felt that, what's the question you didn't ask? How many people sit through class and don't ask questions because they don't want to look stupid? Right? So fear holds us back in a ton of different ways. And I want you to just, if not challenge it, at least be aware of it. So, and this is my personal mission, and I would love to see this happen. Introduce at least one person to someone else with no thought of how it might benefit you. And imagine what a world would be like if you knew that all the people you knew were out there thinking with you in mind, hey, I think those two would connect well. And how great would that be? And meet someone new. So thank you for your time. And like I said, I want to be a resource for you. This is some ways to get a hold of me. And feel free to reach out.